Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. This is the Ask the Team session of Build 2020. This is the Microsoft Teams product group talking. We're going to give you, our partners and customers, an opportunity to ask questions of us, Microsoft Teams engineering. We have folks representing product management, engineering, design, and validation and store ops, who are here to answer your questions about how to build on the platform, how to have a successful time by building engaging experiences for your customers using the extensibility platform that we have on Microsoft Teams. Excited to have you guys here today to join us. Look forward to answering a bunch of your questions, hopefully giving you a lot of insight on what it takes to be successful. I'd like to share a few housekeeping items before we get started. A few things around the agenda today. So like I said, showing a little bit of, or talking a little bit about the housekeeping and the format of the session today, how to ask a question, that kind of thing. I'm going to introduce the team in more detail, give you an overview of the folks that we have on the call today. And then we'll hand over the forum to you, our customers and partners, to answer any open questions that you have. Hopefully we can provide you with some insight into what it takes to build the most engaging experience for your customers. So moving forward, like I mentioned, in order to engage with us and ask us questions, please use the chat box that's on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll publish the questions that we find most suitable and work our way through everything that's in that list, hopefully. You can choose to publish a question anonymously or use a name if you'd like to. All of the questions that are approved will appear in that list, and we'll get to them as and when time permits. One of the things that will really help us is to upvote questions that you find relevant and interesting to you. That will also help, obviously, surface those that are the most popular and make sure we get to them. Each of the experts on the team who I'll introduce shortly will answer those questions verbally and give you an opportunity to ask follow-up questions if your questions aren't answered adequately. And hopefully that will mean that we get through the long list that are going to come in from the community. In terms of etiquette, the session itself will be recorded. This will be something that we'll publish for future reference for folks. Like I said, the moderation here will be conducted by us, so please be patient. Please don't spam the message queue. If you have a question, we'll get to it, time permitting, so please be mindful of that, and also adhere to the Microsoft Code of Conduct, which is listed on this slide here. One of the things to call out is, we expect our participants to be fair and work within the normal norms of digital society, be fair to all of the other participants by not spamming the chat, things like that. Harassment, any other behavior like that won't be tolerated, so please bear that in mind. Now I'd like to introduce the team. So myself, I'm Clint Williams. I'm a principal program manager working in Teams engineering. I work with our strategic partners to help them deliver the best possible app experience in Teams and publish that into the store. If I didn't work in tech, I think I'd be a chef. I consider myself the next Gordon Ramsay. Not really, I aspire to be that good. Next, I'd like to introduce Priya Koshi, who manages our store operations team. Priya, over to you. I'll let you introduce yourself. Over to you, Priya.
Hey, my name is Priya Koshi. I'm a senior program manager here at Teams platform. What I do is help publishers, after they submit an app into the store, validate for the quality of the app, and ultimately publish it into the Teams global store and app source. If I were not in tech, I would probably be a men's hairstylist because I'm getting a lot of practice now in this lockdown.
Thanks, Priya. Next, I'd like to hand over to Adrian Solis, who's our Principal Engineering Manager in Teams.
Hey Bill, this is Adrian Solis. I am an engineering manager here at Microsoft Teams, and I lead a group of engineers that help partners and ISVs build apps for our Teams platform. Yeah.
Thanks, Adrian.
If I were not in tech, I would be a medical doctor, because that is what my dad has always wanted me to be, a doctor. And so I think that would be my default choice.
Awesome. Thanks, Adrian. And next, I'd like to introduce Ted Griffin. Over to you, Ted.
Hey guys, Ted. I'm a designer for Microsoft Teams platform. I help partners reimagine their product in the collaborative context of Teams. Super excited to be here with you guys and answer whatever questions I can. But wasn't in tech, yeah, definitely try to pursue a career in art. Yeah, for better or worse. Back to you, Clint.
Awesome. Thanks, Ted. So before we get started, I just want to frame the types of questions that we're able to answer today. So as I mentioned, I can help with any questions about what it takes to build successful apps in terms of partner experience or customer experience, what it takes to envision high quality scenarios and make those most engaging for end users. Priya can help out with any questions related to the app publishing process. So what it takes to get a Teams app published in the Teams store and app source. Adrian can help answer any of the developer questions that we have about how to approach building an app for Teams, how to think about the underlying technology that we have on the extensibility platform. And Ted can talk about how to design high quality apps for the most engaging experience for end users. So if we just move forward to the questions, I'm going to go back to the placeholder slide, but for now, I'm going to hand over the first question to Adrian. I think the first one that comes up, is there a time frame for a client API, for example, allowing you to interact with a Teams client similar to the Link client in Skype for Business? This particular question, the end user needs that for a telephony integration. So initiate calls, receive calls, and react with the caller information. Adrian, anything comes to mind for that?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we are definitely working on. So SDKs to allow for telephony apps on mobile and desktop. It's an area of active development right now, actually. I'm not sure if we have had a specific timeline released, but know that we're working on it.
Awesome. Adrian, the next one looks like it's for you as well. When will a bot in Teams be able to create and manage group chats? I have an application where I'd like to do this now, but you can only create one-on-one or channel conversations.
We have heard of that request many times, and again, it's something that we're working on.
Yeah, I can add to that. It's certainly at the top of our backlog. We don't have a firm commitment in terms of timeline yet, but something that's coming soon. Adrian, another question for you. Is it possible to add a tab to every team in a tenant all at once? Can you explain the best way to facilitate that type of flow from a tenant admin deploying a tab through all channels?
So there is a graph API to enumerate all of the teams. From there, you can, for each team, you would enumerate all of the channels. And then for each channel, there's also a graph API to add a tab to that channel. And so that would be, it's a tedious process of enumerating them all and adding them. But that is I think it's the only way to do it right now.
Cool.
We have PowerShell commandlets for sure for graph, for team enumeration, but I'm not sure about the adding a tab part like that. I'll have to look up.
Cool. me see. Any advice for searching teams, and are there any plans to improve this functionality? For example, enabling search on a string of words. I think from my personal experience, I know that actually, let me address the part about the future plans. There's constant evolution of the search experience in Teams, adding new types of assets, the ability to improve that search so it's more relevant. I know that there's folks focusing their attention on that. In terms of searching for a string, I usually just wrap any string of keywords in inverted commas, and I find that that works fairly well in terms of searching through chats and channel conversations that have happened in the past. Any other folks on the call have anything to add there in terms of their personal experience with search and how best to deal with that?
No, I did discover the filtering, which helped me a lot. Yeah,
I use filtering myself quite often to filter it down to if I remember a particular conversation happened via chat or channel, or if I remember someone that was involved in that conversation, I generally use the filters to do that.
Before then, I found it quite frustrating as well, but that changed my life, knowing that I could filter that way.
Yep, me too. Recently noticed that if a bot is also a messaging extension, the messaging extension commands get duplicated, even if you're using your official example app manifest. Is this a known issue or your machine type problem? Adrian, I'll hand that one to you.
Is this a side-loaded app?
It's not clear from the question, but let's perhaps provide guidance based on that basis.
Okay, because we've seen this before, and is a kind of a top quote-unquote complaint for developers. Is what happens is when we see a bot, we try to look up its app definition, and so we find a likely corresponding bot and messaging extension for that bot ID, and then we just end up merging the bot menus for both of those. And so that's why sometimes you see duplicates of your task, of the suggestions in the bot menu. That points to you having two apps side-loaded with different IDs, but that contain the same bot. And that's a top reason for it. That's why I asked if it was a side-loaded bot, because that's what I've seen it in. And the fix for that would be to uninstall all versions that might have the same bot and kind of start from scratch, sticking to the one app, one bot model.
Awesome, thanks, Adrian. A question about, can a Teams bot interact with Jenkins to kick off a build, for example? Using the public APIs that are available, it's definitely a possibility. Adrian, have you worked with any partners or customers who have interacted with any of the Jenkins APIs?
Have I? Not off the top of my head, no. But it seems like something that should be possible. I mean, they're two services in the end. So a bot would get a command and analyze the content of the command to figure out what the intent was, and then talk to the Jenkins server to execute it. Conceptually it's possible, but I think there's some other deeper question here that I'm kind of missing.
Sure. Whoever posted that question, if you can provide a little bit more context, we'll have Adrian jump on that. A question here that I'll take, listening to a few different talks here at Build, it feels like Microsoft is making Teams the hub of the Office 365 or Microsoft 365 experience, replacing SharePoint. Is this only a response to the COVID-19 situation, or is this a long-term plan for Microsoft? So certainly not a plan to replace SharePoint with Teams. You're right in mentioning that Teams is the hub for we describe it as the hub for teamwork and productivity. So certainly all the M365 services will tap into what exists inside Teams, but no plan to replace SharePoint with Teams. They'll continue to exist as standalone products because they add their own value separately as well as in combination with one another. I think that there are use cases where customers will only want SharePoint and may not want Teams. There's obviously those where everyone will, where a customer will want both of those experiences merged together. When apps pop out, will it be available to everyone? Ted, I might hand this to you. Can you talk a little bit about what may be coming in terms of apps popping out and being available in multi-window?
Sure, yeah. We are very excited to start enabling applications to pop out in Teams. I'm not entirely certain if we are going to make that something that's universal in a framework, something we provide that is every app, anytime you want, pop it out. I'm not quite sure if we've rationalized that just yet, but there's definitely a lot of strong use cases to support it. And it's definitely something we're implementing for the time being. So yeah, I mean, looking forward to it. I don't know how much more I can say, to be honest.
Cool. Thanks, Ted. Question about, is it possible to search by important tag? Seemingly when I do a simple search for the keyword important, not all messages are returned. I'm actually not aware of a way to do that. That is probably feedback for the team that owns the search experience. It's not something that I've tried to do before, but based on the filters that are available, I don't remember that as one. So we'll note that and take it back to the team to assess as part of their roadmap. Question for you, perhaps, Adrian. Is there? Sorry, I just lost the question. Come back to it. I lost that one. It's stuck somewhere between the queue and those that are published live. Is there a way to use the insider version of Teams? Adrian, do you have any experience with the best way to get early builds for Teams and any other products?
So there's one public way, which is the public developer preview that we have, so that gives you early access to developer-facing features before we ship something like, say, Adaptive Cards 1.0 or Tab SSO that usually shows up in the developer preview first. So that one you can switch. There's instructions online for switching to that, and anyone can do that. And then there's also like internal other programs like the Tab program where certain companies can opt in to see an earlier build of the product. But those are the only two I know of.
Awesome. Thanks, Adrian. I'll take this one. Is Teams being designed to eventually replace Outlook? Similar to the question about SharePoint, no, it's not. We see a future vision where email and Teams continue to coexist. There's certainly no future direction within the company to kill email altogether. They both obviously have their purpose, and we continue to use both email and chat and channel conversations internally for communication. So certainly no plans on the horizon for that. I think email will always continue to play a part in corporate communications. Is there a plan to allow a user to choose a default tab in a channel? Ted, do you know anything about that? I know there's some work on the roadmap to allow a developer to choose the default tab on within their personal app.
Yeah, at the channel level, I think we're still promoting the conversational canvas first. There may be some explorations going on at the moment, but I think we're going to, unless there's some sort of customized view that I'm unaware of, I think default view will be the channel stream of conversation. You can reorder your tabs, but I think default zero state will be the channel once you navigate there from the left rail.
Awesome. Thanks, Ted.
Mm-hmm.
Adrian, this is perhaps a question for you. Inside Microsoft Graph, I execute the query /me/join teams with an empty result. Can I send a message / create a meeting with the REST API? Where can I find the team ID?
That would be from the result of the join teams API. So I'm not sure I quite understand the question.
Yeah, perhaps the person that asked that question, if they can add more information, we'll circle back to that question.
Yeah, is the problem that there's no teams coming back from the join teams API, or is the question about where do I get the ID to pass when I try to create a meeting? And what kind of meeting? Is this like an ad hoc meeting in a channel, like a meeting in a channel, or a standalone meeting? Then we can discuss further.
Awesome. Here's a question that I think is relevant to everyone. Let's go around the table and talk about this one. What would we say are the some of the under-marketed features of Teams that we would like to highlight? That's a good question. I think certain points of extensibility don't get the airtime that they deserve. I think something like a messaging extension, I find, is super powerful in Teams. I think it's one of those points of extensibility that, when used correctly, is really valuable in a lot of contexts. So I think the primary use case is around search and the ability to provide a mechanism for someone to search through a list of items and then send a snippet of the search results into a chat or a channel conversation. So in a scenario, perhaps there's a project management app that has a messaging extension, and an end user would want to search through all of the recently opened tasks, for example, or all of the tasks that have been assigned to that end user, and then share those into a chat or channel conversation to start some collaboration. That's the primary use case, but I think the one that's really under-marketed is what we call internally the create compose flow, which allows a user to actually go through perhaps a series of steps. So perhaps in the project management scenario, it might be someone could use a messaging extension to create a new task and assign it to one of their co-workers. I think that flow itself is under-marketed and underutilized by a lot of partners and customers. And the real value there is it allows teams to be the single location where you create items and share content from within Teams back out to an external service. I think that flow in and of itself is super valuable, super powerful. There's some really interesting scenarios out there that exist in the wild. For reference, the SurveyMonkey app, I think, is a really good one that we've published recently that allows someone to use that create compose flow to create a new survey or a poll and publish that into a chat or channel conversation. Suggest everyone take a look at that. Ted, I'll hand over to you next. What, from your perspective, do you think is a under-marketed feature of Teams that we'd like to highlight?
Geez, I'm not aware of what we're under-marketing personally.
What do you think we're using, or we're seeing partners and customers adopt least that they should be using?
Well, I'll second your message extension because I agree it's super powerful. And now we enable people to create as well as share something that exists from the message extension into the stream of conversation. And I think that's super powerful. In addition, I also love personal apps. I think a successful personal app is a huge win. So conversational bot in conjunction with tabs. I mean, it really depends on what your service provides to the user. But having that aggregate view of this service throughout the tenant goes a long way. And it's something I'd like to see utilized more.
Awesome. Adrian, over to you next. What's your favorite thing that we're not seeing partners and customers adopt as much as we think they should?
Link unfurling, I think, is one of the things that I wish people would do more. It's a really easy feature to use from the user's perspective. It delights me to see links unfurl and get more info added to my messages. It's like magic. And for folks that don't have the app, it's also a way to upsell them, to introduce them to apps and teams in general, and the specific app that unfurled your link. So it's a peek into the magic of what you can do with apps inside teams.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I like that one too. Priya,
Yes.
you and your team see a lot of apps come in for store validation. Yeah. What are the things you see underutilized?
Yes, I think what partners are right now not using much is the M365 app certification program. So if you get your app certified, it offers assurance to Microsoft customers, confidence and assurance that the data and privacy are very secure and protected. So such kind of an assurance that Microsoft is providing to your app definitely has to be much better utilized by our partners, I feel. So I would encourage all of our partners to go get certified.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a good one, Priya. I can't reiterate that enough. It certainly adds customer confirms any concerns that a customer has about apps and their handling of security and data privacy and all that sort of thing. It breaks down a lot of barriers for customers and encourages them to enable apps. So can't agree more. Priya, another question for you while we have you. What would you say are the most repeated fails that you've seen for an app that a developer needs to take care of? What are the things that we most frequently see when apps are submitted?
Yeah. Yes, I think most of the cases that I have noticed while developers submit an app is primarily around the first run experience. So if you have a bot, there are certain basic hygiene factors that needs to be adhered to. A bot should have a welcome message which talks about the value proposition of what the bot is about. There should be a help command which unblocks a user and tells him what all are the commands that your bot can respond on. Now, if you got a tab, right, the tab should be a very simple web page pinned to the channel, as opposed to having the entire website with complex navigations pinned. So that is totally defeating the purpose of a tab. In addition to that, I have seen repeated failures around the sign up process. The partners I have seen assume that users have a sign in flow. So for a first run experience, when a user does not have a way to sign up for the app, I think that is also a great part to be included in your app. In addition to this, I have noticed certain performance aspects like the load time in a tab or response time in a bot is much more than 5 seconds. So those I feel are some of the repeated fails that I have noticed in a submitted app. And the good news is all of this are documented in our dev docs. It's AKMS/rapid approval. I'll share all the links out here in the chat for all of you.
Awesome. Thanks, Priya. Are there any plans to add Translator meeting features? So certainly some some interest from partners in the ecosystem around building these types of capabilities. We've met with a number of partners in recent times, particularly as the COVID-19 situation has limited folks to remote meetings. This is something that's been bubbled up by a lot of customers. There are some partners who have already published into the ecosystem, so encourage you to go and check that out. I think there's a massive opportunity to continue to go deep there. We have a lot of interest from all the way from large enterprises, government organizations, down to small and mid-sized companies who are using some of these capabilities inside their organizations today. Encourage you to go and check out what exists out there in the ecosystem. Where are we at next? How will Microsoft enhance Teams features under the expansion of remote work? That's a good question. I think super broad and loads of different ways to answer that. I might pose this to the rest of the team as well. I think one thing to call out is we continue to iterate on the product. Every week we're shipping new features and functionality to improve the experience for our customers in a COVID-19 impacted world. We're certainly we've learned a lot about the product since we've seen an increased demand. We've obviously had to adapt rapidly to the changing nature of work internally ourselves, as well as our customers and partners have. I think the main part of the product which is adapted and moved quickly is around calling and meetings. Obviously, more folks using those particular features on a regular basis. So we've made some rapid enhancements there. We'll continue to invest in that particular area. From an ecosystem perspective and from the partners that we work with in the app ecosystem, we're continuing to work with our strategic partners to encourage them to think about those scenarios that impact remote work. So in situations where employees are going to be returning to the office, how do we handle those situations around confirming that there's adequate spacing between employees and that people are checking in before they're going into the office to confirm that they don't have any symptoms, those kinds of things. We'll continue to spend time there because we know that our customers will find value in those particular scenarios. Ted, anything that you'd want to call out in terms of themes that you've started to emerge in both the core product and the ecosystem since we've started to adopt the new world?
Yeah, just from my personal experience, I've seen a lot of momentum generated towards leveraging whatever extensible canvases we provide currently in Teams, just more tailored to, hey, I want to create a survey to check in on my employee or my work group, right? So we're all working from home. So I'm going to make a little survey message extension and share it with my peer group and make sure we're all doing okay. So there's a lot of these little app templates that are being created and sort of positioned to address this new phenomenon of us all working from home. So yeah, I mean, it's exciting. There's been a lot of momentum. And it's been great to see, Teams already was sort of, fostering this ability to, empower our users to work remotely or work in the office. It doesn't really matter because Teams lets you do what you want to do or what you need to do. So now it seems like because of this epidemic, we've just really picked up a lot more steam, and it's not, it's not the best reason for it, but yeah, I think it's great to see people leveraging the power of Teams to really sort of be closer to one another despite this epidemic.
Awesome. Thanks, Ted. Adrian, anything that you've seen start to emerge in terms of the themes of partners and customers you've been involved with recently?
Yes, so I see a renewed focus on meetings extensibility, and especially in terms of apps that can be used within meetings, which is something that's probably been happening more with the pandemic going on than before. And so we see teams investing in that area, and likewise we see partners eager to get their meetings enabled, their apps enabled for use within meetings, whether they're like surveying apps or polling apps or business processes apps within meetings. Kind of makes sense with that being the new hub or the new way that people like touch base. Like apps can and should fill in some of the friction points in that area.
Awesome. Priya, how about you? Anything you've noticed?
Yes. So at least in the last quarter, I have been seeing many number of apps getting added into the Teams global store. And most of them are, I feel, the right app for remote work needs. There are apps for conducting stand-up. There is the Agile Poly app, which is great. Then there are apps for doing whiteboarding. There is the InVision app. There is a Mural app. There is a MindMeister app. There are apps for employee recognition, which is definitely a need for the hour, right? Right now, employees need to be motivated and their morale needs to be boosted. A great app I would recommend is the Disco app, which is very well built in, something that I would recommend our customers and partners to definitely use. And of course, to your point, Ted, like how he mentioned, there are a lot of pulse checking in apps for employees. A good app I would recommend would be the QB app and the Tiny Pulse app. So yes, a lot of apps to check out in our Global Teams App Store.
Awesome. Thanks, Priya. Adrian, I might hand back over to you. This question is, can you give some more details on the tab SSO? Will that include task modules popped by bots? You're on mute, Adrian. Adrian, you're on mute, I think.
Yeah, it was on mute.
There we go.
So task modules will support Tab SSO as long as they're the kind of task modules that are implemented by an iframe page versus the adaptive cart based one.
Cool.
There's a couple of sessions actually at Build that talk about Tab SSO. I don't know if you caught the one by Nick Kramer. I think he's doing a live session where he walks through Tab SSO and our resource specific consent. So like two new authentication authorization related technologies that we introduced that we are going to release pretty soon. And I also have a pre-recorded session where I go through authentication and authorization in Teams apps in general, including Tab SSO.
Awesome. Thanks, Adrian. While I have you, another question for you. Right now in a bot, an adaptive card can only have 6 actions, including inline. Is there a way to increase that limit?
Not right now, no.
I thought the limit was 7 actually. Maybe I'm confused.
Beyond that limit, there's
a
way to.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean to contradict your answer.
Does that include like hyperlink text as well? If I have like assign a URL.
Wait, you mean like having an action, a tap action attached to an element? Mm-hmm. That's what you would do in hyperlink.
Yeah.
Oh, I suppose that may be true, but that wouldn't be the actual buttons, right? Like
no, right.
There are actionable elements on the.
It would show as like actionable text, or maybe it's on an image or something.
So I guess, is it action as in I want more buttons on the card, or I want something to act on? In which case, Ted, I think you're right.
Yeah, 6 buttons, but then you can go crazy with your hyperlink text actions. Don't go too crazy though.
Yeah, I was going to wrap that caveat around it as well. Okay, here's a question I think that applies to everyone. Let's all take our individual perspective on this, can you give a high-level overview of the process for creating a Teams app? So let me start with the process right from the start in terms of how, from a PM perspective, we work with partners. I'll then hand over to Ted to get his buy-in from a design perspective. Then we'll hand over to Adrian, and then finally to Priya, which is actually the process that a lot of our partner apps go through as they're published into the store, and how our engagements work with strategic partners. So at a high level, from a PM perspective, we ask our partners and customers to think about the high value scenarios that are going to add value for their end users. So if there's an existing web application that they're trying to bring inside Teams, we get them to think about those end-to-end flows that an end user would do most frequently. Let's think about the ones that they do every day or every week. Let's think about the things that we find most relevant to Teams, so that there's it's possible that there's scenarios that don't make sense to bring inside Teams, super complex workflows or super complex. Let's imagine building a sales report, perhaps in a Salesforce context or something like that. It wouldn't always make sense to bring those scenarios inside Teams. So we try and limit them to those productivity and collaboration related scenarios. We generally come up with a list of user stories that make the most sense, and then try and map them back to the points of extensibility that exist inside Teams. So thinking about the scenarios that involve searching for content or returning a list of items. Does it make sense to use a messaging extension, like I mentioned before, to facilitate that scenario? Or does it make sense to use a bot and a conversational bot where someone would ask the bot a question and it would return a list? Try and, at a high level, map them back to those end-to-end, or back to those points of extensibility. And then from there, this is where we hand over to our friends in design. So Ted, I'll hand over to you and get your perspective on how you pick up those user stories that come from your friends in program management, and how you make them look nice and make sure that the user experience is optimized.
Yeah, of course. You really were, I agree with everything you're saying. I'm just going to build on top of it and really emphasize the need for scenarios. When you are kind of setting out just the initial phase of thinking about whatever your integration may be, whatever your application does, think about the jobs to be done. What are your users going to be doing with this application? And how is it going to manifest itself in Teams? How are your users going to anticipate it manifesting in Teams? If you have access to users, interview them, show them wireframes, mock up a whiteboard, make a big mess, really just iterate. This is once you start implementing, that's when things start getting expensive, right? Whiteboarding's free. If you have a whiteboard or a piece of paper and a pencil, just start mocking up your scenarios and your user journeys, and refine, test, and then start implementing once you have something really solid.
Cool. Thanks, Ted. Adrian, once your friends in PM and design hand you a spec or the outlines of a spec, what's your advice for developers when they're starting to build? What's the best way to make sure that they land on their feet and they're successful?
Well, the next step is to take a giant red X to the things that I got and send them back.
Not my stuff, Adrian. Come on.
Just kidding. So then, now we talk implementation, right? So we look at what the capabilities are that are implemented by the app that's being proposed. I personally do a check as well. Like, I'm a user and I have my own opinions. I can see does this flow make sense or not. But given that, so I would start thinking about what would it take to implement this app? Is it a bot? Does it use tabs? What kinds of tabs? What should I be using for these things? And then as a starter developer, I might go online and look for samples. I start with if there's a bot, I start with a very simple scaffolding bot, and then kind of build up the features incrementally with good testing along the way. We have GitHub repos for samples. Recently here at Build, we announced the Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio extensions that will help you generate specifically these starter applications. So the bot is a simple one that you can build on top of. It can also generate search messaging extensions, action messaging extensions, and even tabs that are pointing you to kind of using the right tool sets that we would use here inside Microsoft Teams. Yeah, I think that would be what I would do next, and go into a process of iteration for implementing these features, always getting feedback along the way.
Awesome. Thanks, Adrian. Priya, over to you. What are your suggestions to make sure that the process, when the time comes to publish your app in the store, what's your suggested guidance on making that process as efficient as possible?
Yes, I would also like to point out one more point when you're building the app is to make use of our developer community. We are in multiple communities and it's a very self-serving community, so make good use of our developer communities all across. Yes, now when it comes to the publishing process, you have built your app and you're ready for submission. What are the important pointers to keep in mind to ensure that you waste very little time and get your app published into the global store? So ensure that you have a developer account set up in Partner Center. Very, very important, because Teams is part of the Microsoft 365 app catalog, and we want all our apps to be also published in App Source. As a result, you need to be registered as a developer in Partner Center. As soon as you register, you will have to undergo a verification process, which includes your account verification, employee verification, business verification, and if all documents are provided well, it should take you about 3 business days to complete. Once done, go through all the processes, definitely unit test your app, do a smoke test, run your sanity test to ensure that the most failed test cases which we have published in our developer documents are all covered. With that, I think it's a good idea to furnish test notes for our validators. For example, if your app is requiring license, it is a good idea to include some credentials out there for the validators to self-test it before they fail you or they want to reach out to you for details on how to test the app. So including test notes is a great process. In addition to that, yes, once you have submitted your app on Partner Center, you can track your status of whether the app is in the validation phase or whether the validation is completed. For an app which is submitted with great quality, our internal SLA guideline is to revert to you with a test report within 1 working day. And we have noticed that apps typically take about 2 weeks to get themselves published into the global store. Once done, definitely proceed with the M365 certification program to make sure that your app is trusted by Microsoft customers. So that would ensure that your app has got high visibility and it is a marketing of its own.
Awesome. Thanks, Priya. A couple of questions that I'll take myself here. Are there any plans to add planner integration to private channels? So yes, absolutely. Apps are coming to private channels. I don't think we have a clear timeline on when everything will be available, but it's certainly on the horizon and coming very soon. Do you have any plans when the Microsoft Teams Graph API will become GA and not beta anymore? So we definitely add certain individual API calls to GA at certain times, and we have a regular cadence of pushing those out to GA. The reason that we leave a lot of those Graph APIs in beta is so we can collect feedback from customers and partners and validate that when these APIs are being used, that people are actually finding value in them. So certainly encourage you to use those APIs. We encourage partners and customers to even use them in production. We use them in production in certain internal Microsoft products. So there's no concerns from a service level perspective, SLAs or anything like that. As I said, the reason that we leave them in beta is so we can collect enough information to confirm that they have right level of functionality and that people are actually finding value from them. It just means that we're able to make changes to them more rapidly when they stay in that beta state. Adrian, anything to add there?
Yeah, so we released several APIs to V1.0 here at Build. I think the primary channel, the files folder, and then the APIs for sending messages to a channel, I believe are now all in V1. And then, as Clint said, in terms of support, we treat the beta endpoint almost like a production endpoint in terms of supporting it and dealing with live sites. And on that endpoint, the risk that you do take with that is that, as Clint says, being in beta means that these APIs are still subject to refinement as we kind of figure out like what are the actual use cases for these, do they meet them? And so there may be some API changes happening to them before they get to GA. And we provide a good amount of notice for those.
Awesome, thanks, Adrian. Priya, a question for you. I saw you provided a link to the app certification website, but do you want to provide an overview of the M365 certification program? What's involved for a developer? What they're likely to come across as they go through that process? You're on mute, Priya.
So sorry. Yes, so the details of the M365 certification program is provided in that on that link that I shared. So there are multiple tiers to this program. There are two tiers. First one is the partner self-attests himself or herself to a set of questions, which is related not just to your app, but about your company, about how you are collecting all the information from the user and the data handling part. So there are multiple questions around it, and we expect the partner to answer it, and these answers are published. So this is the tier 1 process of self-attestation. After this, the certification program basically is Microsoft going and testing all the declaration provided by the partner. There would be deep level security testing done by Microsoft validators in order to attest what the partner is telling is true or not. So once that process is done is when you get the certified badge, which is also shown in the global store app source.
Thanks, Priya. A question I'll take regarding Teams being available as a consumer product or strictly B2B. So maybe around a month ago, we announced some plans to create a consumer version of the product. So I encourage you, and I'll find some documentation and drop it in the chat window. The product is called Teams for Life and provides a combination of the most engaging features that are existing in the enterprise product. And there we go, someone's dropped them into the chat. Thanks, Adrian. And brings those into a consumer context. So allows you to use the Teams capabilities throughout your day, regardless of whether you're at home and communicating with your family, flipping to the enterprise context where you're dealing with your colleagues. So yeah, look out for that, something that's shipping towards the end of the year. Will there be application permissions for the Graph Presence API, and when can we expect it? Adrian, I'll hand that one to you.
I actually don't know. We'll have to follow up.
Yeah, sure. I actually don't know the answer to that to myself. Where are we? Will there be a share feature to pass on, for example, images from one chat to another? I know that it's not something that we have in the near-term roadmap in terms of core capabilities. How have you seen partners implement something like that, Adrian?
Passing it from one chat to another?
Yep.
I suppose if you had an app installed in both, you could use a message action to start the sharing, and then the app would post it onto the other channel.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. When will new Teams app permissions be released? For example, member.read.group and channel message.read.group.
They might be out. I know we announced these finer grained permissions here at Build, one of which is allows you to read the members of a group.
Yeah.
I was just looking it up right now on. I was just binging our announcements because I thought we did announce this here.
Yeah, if you can find something, Adrian,
Yep, I will.
drop a link in the chat. Awesome, thank you. Question I'll take around monetization, and are there any plans to allow Teams app developers to sell apps in the Teams public store? So this is actually something that was mentioned, I believe, in Rajesh Jha's keynote, and it's also going to be referenced in some of the additional sessions that are happening today at Build. There are some plans for monetization on the in the Teams store. It's what we're calling the modern marketplace. I'll hopefully be able to find a link to the product announcement about that and drop it in the chat. But yes, certainly something that's coming. Very excited about that. We aim to make our partners who are building on the Teams store successful both from an engagement and commercialization perspective. So we definitely hear you, and like I said, we're releasing some plans about that. We'll be sure to drop a link in the window if we can find something that's relevant. A question about accessibility. Are there accessibility requirements for third-party apps, and are there resources for developers on how to make their apps for Teams accessible? Priya, do you have any guidance around how partners and customers can make sure that they're following any accessibility guidelines when publishing their app in the store?
Yes, so this is not a published blocker right now, but we do from time to time check and certify apps based on their accessibility requirement. This is not really published at the moment, or we don't block our partners from publishing apps which are not really accessible. The guideline for that I will find and share it out here. At the moment, at least blocker I would say is to check your app in the various themes, the dark mode and the light mode. That's all. But deeper level accessibility tests are not done at the moment.
Cool. A question about, is there a model app for building a bot with a tab? Adrian, I'll hand over to you. Do we have any sample apps or snippets that you suggest the developer should look at to complete that flow?
So for a starter, if we're just talking about getting started, the Visual Studio Code extension will generate an app that has a bot and a tab. In terms of actually integrating like a full-fledged app scenario that you might want to do, I'd recommend looking at some of the app templates that put together a bot and a tab. I'm trying to think of something come to mind. I think Celebrations has one, if I'm not mistaken, and some of the newer app templates have it.
Company Communicator has
one. Ted.
Company Communicator has it, Ted?
Oh yeah, that's right. So Company Communicator has a tab as well that it actually uses task modules and even shows you some of Tab SSO.
Right.
Awesome. So that's actually the last question that we're going to take, folks. We're at time, so appreciate everyone joining the call today. Appreciate all of the questions. there'll be a follow-up session to this tomorrow morning. I think it kicks off around 45 minutes later than this session did today. So please, if your questions weren't answered, please feel free to join that. We appreciate all of your input. Apologies that we didn't get to those questions today. There's a link on the screen to complete a survey that will give us some feedback about how we did and how we can improve these sessions moving forward. Some links to the resources and next steps around building on the Teams platform. And if you go back to the mybuild.microsoft.com site, you'll find a load of additional engaging sessions to hopefully answer a lot of your questions regarding building both within Teams and the whole Microsoft ecosystem. So thanks everyone for joining. Thanks to Ted, Adrian and Priya for their input today. I really appreciate everyone's time. Look forward to hearing from you all as we move forward, and enjoy the rest of your build. Thank you very much.